to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I'm Albert Berg, and my bad idea for this week is soup.
I mean, soup is pretty awesome. I don't know why you've got a problem. What's your beef?
I hate soup, Tony.
Yeah,
I hated it as a
you are
child.
weird about that.
I hate it less now, but in the interest of the show, we'll narrow the type of soup down. We're going to talk about shark fin soup.
I see. You've always had a thing for sharks. I don't know if how many of the people that are listening actually go to the YouTube channel, but most of our successful videos have something to do with sharks with various levels of heads.
I do enjoy a good shark movie, and this particular shark movie of the mind that we're going to take you on, Tony, it starts somewhere back between the 10th and the 14th century AD. The info that I was able to find did not give me a specific date for this incident. But what we do know is that somewhere in that time, one of the emperors of China decided that he was going to throw a party. And at this party, he did that thing that rich people do, where he wanted to show everybody that he really had a lot of money. Like, not just a lot of money, like the stupid amount of money kind of money. And so he introduced a new dish. And this dish that he served at this banquet, this insanely extravagant meal, was shark fin soup. Now, shark fin soup was a rarity at the time and even remains so somewhat to this day because sharks are relatively difficult to catch. There aren't a ton of sharks in the sea compared to other fish. There are a lot of them, okay? But compared to the numbers of other fish, they're relatively rare and they would be relatively difficult to catch.
That really depends on the area. When I was in Georgia, we were trying to fish for whiting and we caught more than a dozen sharks.
Way to undercut my point, Tony.
You can edit
Did you cut their fins off and eat them? Okay.
We immediately released them and patted them on the back and we're like, sorry, bud.
So, as you can imagine, when the king does something in any culture, everybody else wants to do it. All right, so the king had served this really, really nice dish. And so everybody else who could even possibly afford to wanted to have shark fin soup so that they could prove, hey, I'm rich too. I'm awesome. I'm just like the king. I've got shark fin soup. And for a while, the number of wealthy people in China was relatively small. So for hundreds of years, you've got, maybe several hundred types of households that are able to support this kind of extravagance, and everybody else is groveling around in the dirt for worms or roots or whatever. But in the 18th century, all that starts to change. A number of factors in the Chinese economy mean that there is a growing upper middle class, and also changes in fishing technology mean that sharks become more available at the same time. In fact, some of the changes in the fishing technology created the upper middle class. And so this ultra exclusive practice of consuming shark fins and shark fin soup starts to filter down to more and more people. But it still has this high status of being seen as this something that you do because you're very prosperous, because you're very wealthy. It's a symbol of how rich you are, even though you don't have to be as rich to afford it anymore.
I mean, it makes sense that you would have that sort of a class symbol. It's not a great thing, but I can understand why people would still have it up there ranked like that.
Right. And even then, with the growing middle class, you still didn't have enough people in China to really impact the population of sharks. But China doesn't stay small, all right? We all know this. China gets huge. And this culture of shark fin soup grows with the population. There's an old Chinese saying that says, a bride marrying into family without shark fin soup on the table is marrying into a poor family. And even if you are poor, you don't want to look poor, especially at your wedding. And so this becomes this traditional wedding food at Chinese weddings. And as the population of China grows, you have more and more and more and more people trying to get shark fin soup. Now, the problem here is the population of China is growing. The population of sharks, not so much. Now, there are a lot of sharks in the ocean, but their population is not growing at the same rate that the global population of humans is. And so throughout the latter half of the 20th century, the demand for shark fin grows at an alarming rate. In 1950, fishermen were catching 200,000 tons of sharks. By 2001, they would go to catching 600,000 tons of shark meat.
That is a lot of shark.
It is a lot. There are even more staggering numbers. If you're not able to envision sharks in tonnage, we'll talk about even more scary numbers. But the problem here is, beyond just overfishing the sharks, they're not just catching sharks and bringing them into land and processing them for their meat and then also taking the fins and putting them in soup. What these shark fin fishermen do is they catch the sharks, cut the fins off of the sharks while they're still alive, and throw the still living finless shark back into the ocean, where it sinks to the bottom, again still alive for a while, and drowns, which a fish can do if it can't pass water over its gills.
Yeah, it's just intolerable cruelty.
It's insanely cruel, and the reason they do this is because the rest of the meat on a shark is almost worthless, especially compared to the shark fin.
You can get shark steaks, and sometimes they're all right, but I've always heard that because they don't have the best renal systems, it's kind of they aren't the cleanest of meats. It has kind of a urine taste to it.
I've heard there's ways to prepare the meat so that it's not quite as bad, although I don't have as much experience with that. I have eaten a shark once, I believe, and don't remember what the taste was because it was a while back. But the value of the fins is much, much higher than the meat, and so they mostly just, again, butcher these sharks still alive and throw them back into the wild where they will die. This is essentially like if rabbits' feet were so popular and so expensive that people were catching rabbits, cutting their feet off, and then throwing them back into the woods to kind of flail around without feet, but still alive. It's messed up.
Image. Yeah.
Now, it's possible that you're listening to this and you don't really care. And the thing is, I think it's difficult to get people to empathize or even sympathize with sharks because we've been taught to see them as monsters thanks to Jaws and the many, many movies that it's inspired. But the truth is that sharks are among the least deadly things on the planet.
At least to humans, anyway.
Well, as opposed to a lot of things, compared to, statistically speaking now, if you compare the number of humans who are killed by sharks to the numbers of other things, which we will do now. Since 1958, there have only been 2,785 recorded shark attacks on humans. And of those, only 439 were fatal, which is slightly more than 7 deaths globally per year on average to shark bite. If you compare that to the number of people who are killed by hitting deer every year just in the United States, that's 200 people a year in the US, compared to 7 a year in the globe. You're probably not going to die to shark attack. Like, your odds are real bad. However, the same cannot be said to sharks dying to human attack, because it's estimated that humans kill somewhere between 68 million and 273 million sharks every year. If we assume that number is around 100 million, and it's difficult to get some of these numbers to be exact because the people who fish for them are a little bit on the down low because they know there's some antagonism towards the practice. If we assume that it's around 100, that means that humans kill around 11,000 sharks every hour.
Compared to the few hundred of people that have died like over the last century. That's a pretty big ratio.
Well, yeah, in a single hour, we're killing more sharks than have attacked humans in the last 50 years. Not even killed, just attacked. Now, to be fair, not all of this can be blamed on shark finning. There are a large number of sharks who are also trapped in some kinds of gill nets, but shark finning accounts for a substantial amount of this problem. And to make this even worse, sharks take about 30 years to mature to the point where they can sexually reproduce. They're a lot like millennials. And zing.
31 and still have not reproduced. I am part of the stereotype.
I'm a millennial too, but I have 2 kids, so cha-ching.
Yeah, and you take care of other people's kids too.
Yes, I do. But what this means is that sharks can't keep up with this rate of overfishing. An animal that, for instance, reproduced very quickly in large numbers and at very early stage of its life would be able to rebound in the population quite quickly. But the more and more we overfish sharks, the less and less chance they have of being able to come back from that because of how long they take to mature. And that leaves many species of shark in danger of complete extinction if current trends continue. Now, even if you have no sympathy for the sharks themselves, and I understand that, I understand people have phobias, they just don't care about the sharks. The thinning of these apex predators actually has a detrimental effect on the rest of the ecosystem in the ocean, because sharks do things like thinning out the weaker prey fish, they keep other populations in check, and other fish, if they are not eaten by sharks, could then explode in population and cause other problems in the ocean that would be much, much more detrimental to human existence than the 7 people who get eaten by a shark every year.
Yeah. It's that old thing where it's like, well, we've lost the ability to like manage a lot of deer populations because we took out all the predators because the predators were dangerous, and now you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of car accidents every year that hurt and maim people because there's too many deer.
Way to bring that deer stat back in, Tony. I was not even thinking about that, but you made it relevant.
I'm occasionally useful.
And the last but not least thing I want to say about shark fin soup is that reportedly it doesn't even taste that good. We're not talking about like gourmet meal quality where you just can't wait to get your hands on the shark fin soup. It's so good and you scrounged up enough money to afford this stuff and man, it's just great to shovel in your mouth. It's completely tasteless from the fin itself. Like, the fin itself adds nothing to the flavor of the soup, and the rest of the flavors just come from the spices. All you get from the fin is the texture. There's kind of this chewy, crunchy texture that the fin provides that I'm told other animal parts can provide as well. I believe people have mentioned that stingray parts can also add that same texture to soup. But, of course, stingray soup is not nearly as prestigious as shark fin soup.
Yeah, it just seems like a true waste of resources, true waste of, like, the animal. I can't think of any reason to do this. I was watching Kitchen Nightmares the other day, and even Gordon Ramsay was going off on one of the owners for even having shark fin soup, about how it's just a waste and completely unnecessary for a restaurant and probably to the detriment of their actual flavor.
The thing is, though, it's so heavily ingrained in Chinese culture that it's really hard to get out. Like, there is expanding awareness of this issue, and shark catching actually peaked in 2001. We've done some things to cut back on our shark killing, but it's still very, very popular, particularly at weddings. I found a stat that said that after cutting back, after the public awareness campaign that has reduced the number of weddings that have shark fin soup at them, now 95% of Chinese weddings have shark fin soup. That's down from before. And there's a lot of people in China, and I assume some of them, a decent portion, are probably going to get married, and so it's just a cultural staple. It is so ingrained as something that you have to do if you want to look good, right? If you don't do it, you lose face. And
yeah, that's almost like a ratio of like how many people have flowers at their weddings.
Yeah, very much so. Only flowers will grow back, most likely.
Yeah, shark fins don't.
Well, not very quickly anyway.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier how valuable they are, and they sell for as much as $450 a pound. Now, that's the upper limit, but I did read an article about someone who had ordered this at a restaurant, and it was a $100 bowl of soup in New York City for shark fin soup.
I imagine that there's a pretty good return on investment on that, like for the fishermen, but that is just, like, it's absurd that it would cost that much. It's absurd that it's even available.
There are many efforts trying to make it be less available. There have been laws that have been passed to try to make this a less appealing option. There are laws that are supposed to prevent shark fins from being brought singly into the United States, but I read recently that they only apply to fishing boats, and there was a huge shipment of shark fins that came in that were on a boat that was technically classified as a freighter, and they couldn't apply the law because it wasn't a fishing boat.
Weird little loopholes.
And people are swimming their shark fins right through those loopholes left and right. It doesn't seem to be slowing down that much. I also wanted to mention in the trying to prevent and raise awareness things, the Chinese government has now banned the serving of shark fin soup at official state functions. So they're aware of the problem. They're trying to raise awareness. They are swearing off of this stuff. Hopefully that will have an effect, because it's not clear how much time the sharks have left. Even if we can reduce the finning of sharks, the population is still going to take some time to rebound, and we have to be able to cut this off fast enough where the rebound happens faster than we're cutting off the finning.
Yeah, it's going to be some true regulation, and we've got enough going on with the oceans as is to get rid of a keystone predator.
And it's also tricky because it's an international issue, right? Like, just because China passes a law and the U.S. passes a law, then smaller countries, the market might still be there, so they can get in and go out in the same waters everybody else fishes in. And if they can make the money, then other people are going to want to try to get in on it and poach around. And it's a tricky thing to fix. And I don't know how to fix it except by doing what I'm doing here and reminding people that even though we might be afraid of sharks, it's really not worth it to drive them to extinction. It's bad for us. It's bad for the planet. It's super bad for the sharks. And I think we should stop. I think it's a bad idea, Tony.
It definitely is.
That is all I have for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you like this, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Check us out over on Twitter at Human Echoes. And if you really like us, go over to patreon.com/Human Echoes and become a member of our Patreon family. Our new pin is out, and it features the Bad Ideas logo designed by Tony, the little brain inside of a light bulb. And that is all we have for this week.
See you guys next week.
Take care, y'all.